we're known for banking more than 1 out of 2 billionaires in the world, the server will say, do you want vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? And they say, yes, I'll have both.
I wanted to talk a bit about inheritance.
I know this really smart, successful billionaire. He said, figuring out the inheritance is the hardest thing that I've ever tried to do. His wife is better. She's like, just do it so they don't fight, If you don't get those right first, actually being a quote unquote good investor can really mess up your life and your money.
If someone young, say someone in their 20s, is looking to build wealth through investing today, how would you say they should structure their path?
The number one thing is,
what's the biggest mistake wealthy investors make with their money?
they make it about so many different things that aren't about the money and the stated goal of, having a good retirement or other things. That always fascinates. They say they want to invest for the future, save for retirement, but we all know that money is so many things: emotions and pride and identity. The difference between who you want to become and what you should do with your investments, I hope, is really part of what a good wealth manager can do for a client.
What are the world's wealthiest people most worried about right now?
I think that most worried about is kind of the rapid change to the world order. It's kind of a search for safety in terms of where should they be based and where should they tell their children to be based, both kind of physically, but also directionally on the future and where they should be investing their time and their money. It can be an emotional topic. Where's your family based? Where your business is? Where is the safest place physically? That's always open for debate. What's the best place for business? What's the best places, for the kind of stability of the tax regime? All of those things can play into making these kind of decisions, kind of at the upper end for people who are, say, highly mobile.
You've worked with wealthy families for many years. What's the most surprising thing you've learned from working with these extremely wealthy families and individuals? And that could be around the financial side or the social side.
Well, I think there's two things. I like to say that going to dinners with a lot of billionaires, dessert comes around and the server will say, do you want vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? And they say, yes, I'll have both. And that kind of mindset of abundance, I think, can be really profound, and always check yourself, like, why am I using a but in this sentence? The F. Scott Fitzgerald line, like, the rich are really different than us. I kind of tend to differ. I think there's a lot of forces in the world that wants us to think that rich people are somehow different, or even make rich people think they're different. And because you're different, you should spend your money on these very stupid things. But I actually think people are people, and we all have our inner caveman. And a lot of what we try to do is prevent the inner caveman from running the portfolio. If you want the inner caveman to run the rest of your life, we don't recommend it, but that's kind of your business. But to the extent we can help with the, getting that under control, we think it's to the benefit of portfolios.
And in terms of dealing with, say, billionaire clients that you've mentioned, what asset class are wealthy families increasing their exposure to?
Well, I think that, the rise of privates is always a topic, be that, private equity, private credit. But I think the biggest switch really is from a mindset of investing in fixed income as interest rates, fell in the 1980s to below zero, to now where we have potentially, rates above zero, potentially rising rates, kind of making the switch from being a fixed income investor to some form of equity investor.
I wanted to talk a bit about inheritance. So this must be a big issue for you, kind of transferring from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. I guess if you've got a client over many years, many decades. What are wealthy families most worried about when passing assets on to the next generation?
There's so many different paths. I know this really smart, successful billionaire who he said, this is figuring out the inheritance is the hardest thing that I've ever tried to do. I tried twice and failed and gave it up, but this is kind of my third attempt at it. And he is really trying to put together a system to keep the kids together as a family and pass on values, and manage very specific aspects of how the money flows while he's alive, and his wife is his wife is better. She's like, just do it so they don't fight, and but he's trying to maneuver everything. And then I've talked to other families, and was talking to this gentleman. He's like, well, you saw the movie The Godfather, and there's the Robert Duvall character who's the consigliere. Like, that's my role in the family. Like, my brother makes all the decisions, but I'm kind of the guy who knows the legal side and is kind of the fixer. And in his family, one family member makes all of the decisions, right? And then in other families, it's run much more like a corporation where people vote, I think. But as to the goals, there are some people who want to control things beyond their grave. There's many more who say, I really don't want to pass a lot on to my kids. I want them to get a good education, but I fully intend to have my foundation disperse all of this wealth. And so, that's really interesting to see. I don't know anybody who has it all figured out.
It must be, challenging situation. If I think about something like Succession, the TV series, it's obviously a TV series. So not that it's real life, but having this kind of dynamics within the family, and maybe the politics within the family, decision makers, the kind of Godfather setup, it must be kind of challenging for you and your team to navigate that situation whilst at the same time trying to put your best foot forward in terms of advice or investing kind of position.
We're not doctors, but I think there are parallels, right? Because a doctor has clear goals about what they want to achieve, which is to, wherever a person's health is, to improve it and improve their life. But a doctor also knows that you got to stop smoking and eat less, right? Like, that's true, but if that's not getting it done, right? So it's similar with portfolios. It can be you should trade more or you should trade less. We do a lot of work on creating asset allocations that we think are robust and suited for clients based on their goals, trying to get the clients to actually make their portfolios look like that is similar work. But you feel like there's a clear goal. You feel like you're trying to help people, and so you've got to meet them wherever it is they come to you and try to move in that direction. So it can be fascinating. Yeah.
What separates families that preserve wealth over generation to generation to generation from those who potentially lose it?
You can divorce it. You can lose it to kind of disease, plague, or war. You can spend it, but I think spending it is all just spending it on things or whatever is not often necessarily the biggest driver of what happens to the portfolio over time. So there's a luck component. Are you properly in the right location? You just can't control that. And the flip side of all that is, well, if you truly diversify with an asset allocation and you stick to it, you're very unlikely to destroy the wealth. But the difficulty is people, while they may intellectually understand the concept of asset allocation and rebalancing, and sticking to it is a big part of the work. Just like people understand that they should stop smoking and not eat too much, but it's difficult. We're people.
Every case is different. Every family is different. Every client's different. But if you had to give, say, a template of asset allocation for one of your clients, how would it potentially factor percentage-wise? So X percentage of this, X percentage of this. And is there any allocation made for things like cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so look, I think the most important decision that people have to make, and it wasn't easy for me to come to this realization, is much simpler than that. It's kind of, we call it the 3 L's, liquidity, longevity, and legacy, which means kind of what do I need for the next 3 years? What do I need over the course of my life? And then what do I potentially want to pass along? That is the first step actually in creating the asset allocation, because obviously the liquidity is much more around cash and fixed income, whereas the legacy can be more about long-term. I mean, you could put a forest or a wind turbine in your legacy bucket, right, in a way that you couldn't in your liquidity. So that's the first thing. But I would say that one of the things that we focus on is trying to get clients more invested in equities, because I think over the past 20 years since the financial crisis, the role of equities in kind of the way that the government thinks about the economy has changed to a degree and become, I think, more important.
And what long-term risk do you think markets are maybe underpricing right now?
Well, I think at an individual level, what you see time and time again is a mispricing of liquidity and liquidity needs. And we can see that from major universities who have misjudged their liquidity needs and are forced to sell off privates sooner than they thought. You see that in individuals as well. That gets back to this kind of bucketing your assets between what you need for today and what you need for the future. So that's a perennial mispricing. And then I think another thing that people misprice is geopolitical risk, because very often it does not have that much of an impact on portfolios beyond, say, a very short-term period. But given the accumulation of geopolitical factors today, I think a lot of people are maybe revisiting that.
Do you think we're entering a fundamentally more unstable decade for investors?
Well, the famous quip, in times like these, it's important to remember there have always been times like these. I think it's different, and I think there are new rules and new things you have to know about this period that matter. But whether or not it's worse than the Cold War, or some of the other things that we've been through, I think that's hard to say, right? We all felt fantastic about a month before COVID hit, that everything was fine, So I think the difficulty that people have in assessing risk is it's a key reason that I'm able to have a job. So
I want to talk a bit more about private markets. Mm-hmm. Very interested to know kind of the conversations that you're having with wealthy families about private markets or wealthy individuals. So how are wealthy families thinking about private markets today?
Well, private markets have grown so much and become, such an important asset class, because public markets, are for many more companies not an attractive way to go forward. So to get a asset allocation that does take on, say, all of the assets out there, smart families have turned more to private privates. But of course, again, they very often don't have the same kind of daily liquidity. And as I mentioned, I think often people underprice that. So again, a lot of the questions are about what do you need in terms of liquidity. We've seen private, particularly on the credit side, we've seen firms come up with funds that have more liquidity to try and tap into the more individual market. And I think those are important discussions to have because there is a difference between a private credit fund that offers some liquidity, maybe with some gates, and the ability to trade a Magnificent Seven stock all day long or potentially 24/7. So those are some of the conversations. And then I think there's important conversations to be had about what are you trying to achieve from the asset class? Is it capital appreciation? Is it that you need the yield because you want to spend the income? Is it just you think it's safer? What does safe mean? So, millions of clients around the globe, I think people enter the conversation in different places, but it all comes down to kind of perceptions of risk, perceptions of what they're trying to add or subtract from their portfolio. And that's where it gets complicated and kind of individual.
And do these wealthy families come to you with any assumptions around private credit? And do you almost have to take a kind of advisory educational role around what it can do and what it can't do?
What we call high net worth, so, families that are not billionaire families are a huge part of our business. I think we're known for banking more than 1 out of 2 billionaires in the world. But, the amount of money that a family has does not necessarily indicate their sophistication or comfort with any particular asset class. So I'd be hesitant to say, there's one thing. Obviously, now that private credit is in the news a lot of what we do is explain why it's in the news, what are some things that they should think about. If you have private credit in your portfolio, what is the size of your exposure? Second, this is not an S&P 500 index fund from various providers. The provider and the actual fund and the exposures matter a heck of a lot. And going through that with them as well is, key to helping them assess or where we manage the funds, assessing what the exposures are and what the right amount is.
And maybe ignoring the recent noise in private credit, do you still think there's going to be kind of a long-term appetite from your clients for the asset class over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Without a doubt, because the way that regulations have evolved, there is it's almost by design, regulators around the world have created almost a need for private credit because it's very hard to get this credit into the public markets or for it to be handled by banks and things. And so, it's so much of the financial landscape that we see today, is based on what regulators have created, and they've basically created this asset class the way it is now after the financial crisis and the way they regulated banks and insurance companies.
Are there any asset classes which wealthy families will proactively bring up and say, what about this?
He or she came up, say, over the past 50 years or something. They may have a preconception about equities as risky versus fixed income as kind of safe. But I think trying to unpack that and say, well, volatility is the way that we often measure risk, but as Warren Buffett says, kind of really risk is the permanent loss of capital, right? And so, in a world where bond yields can rise, what is risky is different than when bond yields could only go down. And so I think reestablishing that conversation and is key to what we do and also how we can help clients.
When UBS advises wealthy individuals on bond investments or fixed income, how important do you think credit ratings are, like the ones we do at S&P?
Credit ratings are integral to the entire financial system. And for us, they can play a specific role because we think that most of the returns that people get are based on the overall asset allocation, but we also do tactical positions to try and add some returns. And on the fixed income side, kind of understanding when companies are going to change ratings, either up or down, that can be a significant source of alpha. So we pay very close attention to ratings and which companies we think are going to get upgraded or downgraded around the ratings.
And for you personally, has advising and investing on behalf of wealthy individuals, wealthy families, changed the way that you think about money?
100%. When I started out, classic value investor, very micro, I was getting my PhD and I used to spend the days reading about dead people in the library, so switching to reading 10Qs and 10Ks was actually very exciting, and I had a tremendous stamina and capacity to do that. But I think I've learned that the big chunks are the things that we've been talking about: asset allocation, separating the part of investing from all the emotions that we have around money. Those are the big chunks, and if you don't get those right first, actually being a quote-unquote good investor can really mess up your life and your money.
If someone young, say someone in their 20s, is looking to build wealth through investing today, how would you say they should structure their path?
I think the number one thing is make investing like as boring as possible. It should be like brushing your teeth. It's a habit. You don't get emotionally worked up about it. You just do it a little bit every day. It sounds ridiculously simple and stupid, and I could give you, very long and complicated answers about asset allocation or the way you should think about earnings improvements as part of your equity allocation. But honestly, it's the behavioral stuff that matters the most, and it's the hardest for people to get on top of.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joseph.